Hello everyone, PenguinSal here again. Back today with the review of Day of Demos 8. I'll admit, Day of Demos 8 was a mixed bag again, but I have a feeling a lot of these Days of Demos are going to be moving forward just because you can't really tell the quality of a demo going into it. And we like to give them a chance before, we judge them from the cover or anything. So, the first demo we played for Day of Demos 8 was called Knight vs. Giant, the Broken Excalibur. So, the first thing I'll say about this one was that I thought that the lore dump, background story, tutorial thing early on was way too much for a demo. I don't think for a demo like this that has 20 minutes of playtime, it needs to have 15 minutes of lore before that. I don't know if it's just to make the demo feel longer, but we skipped through a lot of it, and I said I don't mind lore in games most of the time, but just dropping it on a demo that's 20 minutes long, that's a bit much. I do think that's a bit much. That being said, I do think the gameplay for this one was pretty fun. It's very reminiscent to me of Hades in the way of, in Hades, all the different gods would give you the boons, and you'd have to choose them in your runs to build different synergies and things. Where in this one, essentially, you are playing as King Arthur, and you were reborn by Merlin after all the Knights of the Round Table are murdered. And as you go along your journey, you unlock the statues of the other Knights of the Round Table. So, at the beginning, you have Lysander, and you have Bors, I believe, were the two that you had. And they gave you different powers. They would each give you a weapon and a skill, and you could pick and choose between them to mix and match, and that's essentially how you'd fight the enemies. And as you'd progress through your run, you would find statues of whatever knights that you chose. You'd find statues of them, and they would give you different additional benefits to these skills. It could be reduced cooldown on a special ability. It could be increased damage or crit chance on the sword attacks. It was pretty cool. There was also different blessings you could find that would give you different kind of passive skills or active skills you could use that would require some energy you could get from killing monsters. You collect gold that you use to upgrade the kingdom outside of your runs. They didn't let you do anything with that in the demo, but it seems like a pretty cool idea. Definitely reminiscent of Hades, I think, which I said is not a bad thing. Hades is obviously a very good, successful game. I can understand taking some inspiration from that. But I would say Knight vs. Giant is worth checking out. I said it seems like it's going to be pretty fun. Maybe not anything too breaking the mold to it, but just seems like a fun action-adventure game, roguelike, that, plays with some of the King of Old England mythology. So, I think this one's cool. Feel free to check it out. There's a link for it in the description. Let me know what you think about this one. The second demo we ended up playing for Day of Demos 8 was called Everwarder. This one I didn't know a whole lot about. It looked like it would be some sort of tower defense game. That's essentially how it played out. You essentially were protecting this big crystal, and you would spawn two different things. You would spawn soldiers that would fight off the enemies that would come to break your crystal. You could also spawn these little crystals that you could connect to each other in this pathway that was kind of used to expand the map. A lot of the span is being shrouded by darkness, and the gems can shoot out these little lasers that essentially eat away the darkness, which allow you to explore further out while you control this little tiny spirit that flies around the map and can collect artifacts or activate these altars or find these different portals. This one played out pretty well, I thought. I think the toughest thing about it, at least here in the demo, which they did say there was a skill tree that was not activated for the demo while they continue to polish that up. I'd say the toughest thing for the demo is just the fact that it seemed like the game would take a little while to get going, in the sense of you really upgrade yourself outside of the runs, and they would take these shards that you'd get from high-level artifacts that you'd get during your runs that would break down, and you would use their shards to get different soldier classes and upgrade them and things like that, where early on, you really only have one type of soldier, and they're not very strong. So it definitely seems like a game where you're expected to die over and over and over again and fail your mission and try to get better, which, you know, that's a good gameplay loop. I have no problem with that. That's how these roguelikes always go, and roguelites as well. But in a demo, it's a little bit tougher because, you know, without the skill tree and certain things that are not unlockable in the demo, it just seems like it would be a bit grindy, which is not inherently bad, but in a demo, it's not as great. So this is more, it's tough to showcase it as a demo. I know at the beginning, early on, they said they just wanted to focus on showcasing the gameplay loop, and I think they did a pretty good job at that, and I think that was pretty fun. I think this one has got a lot of really good pieces to it. It seems like a game where the actual full game would be better than the demo once everything is able to be unlocked and you can kind of grind for that stuff to continue to get better. But that was called Everwarder. I thought this one was pretty good and worth checking out. Let me know if you check this one out. The third demo that we tried out was called Dungeon Golf. I was a little bit skeptical about this one. Wasn't really sure what it would have to offer. Essentially, you play through like these different challenges where they assign you one of their random characters that have different abilities, and you either have to destroy all the monsters with golfing before you can go and finish the hole, or you kind of have to speed run it and see how quickly you can get to the hole. It had some funny things to it, like the characters seem pretty fun and their abilities are wacky, and hitting the golf balls at the enemies to take them out, which would give you a -1 stroke, was pretty fun. I thought that was a good idea. But I think my biggest issues with this one are, one, I don't think there's enough content to make this a game you would play more than maybe once with your friends to just mess around with it. And I thought the controls were a little bit janky. You essentially would maneuver the mouse around to control both your accuracy and the power at which you hit the ball. But if you were too close to a wall or something, the camera would start to get really weird, and you would be trying to angle the camera while also angling your shot and your shot's power. It got a little weird. It got a little less smooth than you would want for a game where it's, you know, timing you on some of these things. Like, get there as quick as possible, but you're kind of stuck on the camera. But I thought some of the like special abilities were interesting, and some of the courses and things seemed like they were well crafted. But it just seems like a game that wouldn't have any sort of long-term staying power. Maybe you'd play it once in a while to just mess around with your friends, but I don't think I would be recommending Dungeon Golf going forward. The fourth demo that we played for Day of Demos 8 was called Electrogical. I believe it is a combination of electric and logical, electrogical. So we may be saying it wrong, but that is how I believe it to be pronounced. This is another short puzzle game. Honestly, probably my favorite of the short puzzle games that we've tried out in the last month. Essentially, they kind of build up through this tutorial of like the different mechanics and things. But you're kind of wiring circuitry with these little tiles, and each tile has a number on it, and when you connect the tiles to the end, it has to equal the number that's on the goal. So if the goal is 3, and you have 3 tiles that each have 1, you have to line up the 3 in a path to reach the goal, so 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. But as you go along, they start adding different mechanics, both in terms of the numbers and in terms of the tiles. So the tiles come in different shapes. There are ones on the map that you can rotate around to connect them how you want to. There's like these teleporter ones that look like Wi-Fi signals that essentially will jump it to where you want it to go. And then on the math side of it, it becomes an equation. So instead of just being like +1 +2, they start adding -1. They start adding multiplication. They start adding division. So like, I mean, they had mechanics where you technically your number starts at 0. So if you do a division or multiplication off of that, it'll stay 0. So essentially you get a free tile in the equation. And then once you get all of this played together, they start adding in like point rules where like, oh, this one you get extra points if you use more tiles, or this one you get more points if you use more unique tiles, or if you connect them in like a square. It was actually pretty fun. They had a mechanic at the end where you would set the rules you wanted to try to get the highest point score you could. This one I absolutely believe I'll be checking out when it comes out because it combines two things that I really enjoy. Small tile puzzles and math equations. I understand that would not ring bells for everybody that is watching this, but if this sounds interesting to you, I think you'd really like it. The demo was short. There was only 10 levels, I believe. But I said if this comes out at $2.99 and it's got 100 puzzles, I think that'll be great value, and it's something I'll absolutely be checking out. And if this sounds interesting, I think you should too. It was called Electrogical. Demo number 5 for Day of Demos 8 was called Wizard with a Gun. Now, there's a good chance that you've heard of this one if you follow along with indie games and indie game news and development. And this one is being published by Devolver Digital, which I know I say it a lot, and I probably said it in some of these reviews. They've been kind of on a tear recently, especially. I mean, they published Call to the Lamb, they published Inscription, they've done some of the demos that we've played. And I think if they're connected to it, the game's probably got something going because they have not missed in any time in recent memory. So that makes you feel good about Wizard with a Gun. The other thing that makes you feel good about Wizard with a Gun is the game itself, the gameplay. Essentially, they give you a story about how the world is essentially being destroyed, and you're one of the lone heroes that can do something about it. You start by customizing the way you have your little wizard appear. Mine ended up being like a pilgrim with like a smiling Joker face. Was really nice. That part I enjoyed. I always like little cheeky customization in these things. But essentially you have to go around to different worlds where you have to collect gears to put into the machine that allow you to go back further in time before the world has been destroyed. So essentially you collect the gears, you go back in time, you bring the gear back from that timeline, and you essentially keep going further and further back so you can stop the calamity from happening. It's a pretty good gameplay loop. I think it's a clever idea. I think the gameplay is good. Essentially, you get all sorts of different guns. It does have a lot of crafting with different resources you can get from trees and rocks and metal workings. You have to craft bullets. You also get this like spell book thing that you use to scan things out in the world, which will allow you to craft them at your home base that kind of exists outside of time, so you can craft them permanently even after the world that you are in is destroyed. I think this one has a lot of potential. I think the gameplay is satisfying. I think there seems to be a lot of different things that you're going to be able to craft and resources to get, and different bullet types, and you're a wizard, so I'm imagining you have spells at some point. I'm not 100% sure. But I think Devolver Digital has found another great game to market, and I believe this one's going to be incredibly successful when it comes out, and there's a good chance we'll check it out in the future when it fully releases. It seemed like a lot of fun to me, and there's docile animals out in the world where if the enemy attacks them, they'll fight alongside you, or you can choose to fight them for the resources. There's a lot of clever ideas in here, and I think if you like really just general indie games, I think Wizard with a Gun is something that you would probably want to consider trying out. There is a link for it down in the description. Let me know if you try this one out and if you're excited for it. The last demo that we ended up playing for Day of Demos 8 was called The Wall Mustn't Fall. This is essentially kind of an auto battler tower defense type game where you recruit soldiers who stand on the wall and they essentially fight off the monsters that are coming to take it down. It's a simple concept, but I do actually think there's some complexity here that actually I think made it sort of difficult because they don't really explain anything to you, at least in the demo. But you can recruit different soldiers and they'll fight the things off, and then you have to spend the gold that you get on a bunch of passive upgrades, which are like increasing the amount of soldiers you can have, or the health of your walls, or how good the items are going to be in the shop. Because there's also equipments that you can give to your different soldiers. Each of the soldiers has like a type, like a mage or a marksman. and they get passive buffs if you have multiples of those same types on the wall, which I think that's all well and good. I think a lot of that's really interesting and well crafted. I think my biggest problem with the game, though, is it's just kind of janky. And I know I say janky a lot. It's just a word I started using because I don't really know what else to call it. But, like, they auto-target the enemies, and that has, like, a speed that can be increased with upgrades and things, but that just the aiming is very slow and awkward, and because they're picking the targets, a lot of times they'll be shooting the guys in the back instead of the guys that are currently damaging the wall. Like I said, there's complexity to it, though, and I think a lot of it we didn't delve that far into, where I think you can actually give different soldiers different commands, and like maybe they would focus the guys closer to you or that are hitting you. I'm not really sure. Like I said, a lot of it wasn't really well explained. Overall, I didn't enjoy the wall mustn't fall that much. It just seems very passive, and I don't know. There's something about it that just didn't really strike well with me, and you know, that happens with some of these games. Sometimes they just don't resonate, and the wall mustn't fall did not resonate with me. If you want to check it out for yourself and let me know what you think of it, there's a link for it down in the description for this video. So that was Day of Demos 8. Like I said, it was another mixed bag, but there were a couple in here that I thought were really successful. A couple in here that I thought were less successful. But once again, I think a good showing. I think there are a lot of strong demos out there, and I appreciate the developers for continuing to put demos out there so we can keep reviewing them like this. If you like seeing the reviews for these demos and the other indie game standalone reviews we do, feel free to give a like to the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. It really would help us continue growing the channel, and you'd never miss a video. You'd be able to see all these games that you might, you know, have never heard of and wanted to know more about. Make sure to try out some of these demos for me. Comment down below and let me know which ones you try out, which ones you like more. If you prefer Wizard with a Gun, or if you prefer Everwarder or Electrogical, which one's more your speed and which one you liked the most out of Day of Demos 8. I appreciate you guys watching this, and I'll catch you in the next video.